Three, two. Hello, everyone. I am so excited about today's presentation for a number of reasons. One, because our presenter today is my dear friend, Dr. Mark Sanna, who I absolutely love. Number two, don't normally, but I did pick today's topic of discussion just because of the feedback that I get from all of you and writing in and telling me what kind of information that you want. And Dr. Sanna was immediately the first person that I thought of to best address this topic of discussion. And part of that is because of his unbelievable background and education and help working with chiropractic offices all over the country. Who better else to tell you how to build your practice, accelerate your practice by bringing in associates than this man right here? And I know for a fact that what he's talking about really, really works because I work for Dr. Ray Foxworth, who was a single practitioner in a practice for many, many years. And then with the help of Dr. Sanna and his team has expanded to where we now have multiple associates and will be soon opening a second practice. And that's something that we couldn't have done without their guidance. For those of you who don't know Dr. Mark Sanna, he is the CEO of Breakthrough Coaching. And it's an international healthcare practice management consulting firm. And they really focus on outcome-based, functionally oriented system of procedures that focus on preparing healthcare providers to become the providers of prevention and wellness. He is also an author, a speaker. He's incredibly motivating, and if you have the opportunity to see him live and in person in a city near you, I am begging you, go and listen to him live. Today is going to be an incredibly impactful presentation, but hearing him live will really do something, that thing that renews your spirit, makes the hair on your arm stand up, and get really excited about practice. And speakers like that are so rare, but they get me so excited about what I get to do every day. But I'm going to quit gushing because really we don't want to hear me talk. We want to hear from Dr. Sanna. Dr. Sanna, thank you so much for being here today.
Christy, you are such a joy. I'm sitting here chuckling, and I love you so much. Thanks for inviting me today.
We really appreciate it.
Well, we're ready to roll, guys. Got your seatbelts on. We got a lot of information today, and thanks so much to the folks from ChiroHealthUSA that really it's one of the companies that I wouldn't practice without it. So thanks for all the team does there every single day. So let's hop to it. We're going to talk about associates. And my goodness, I've been a proponent of the associate-driven practice for going on 30 years, and I really, really know that the future of the chiropractic profession is in the group practice, in docs and associates coming together. I like to call it the Batman and Robin, or the Wonder Woman and whoever her sidekick would be. Docs are coming out of school, and they've got $200,000+ in debt. And the best thing for them to do to protect that investment is to go into an existing practice and to learn the business of practice, learn the business of leading a team and managing the finances of the practice and marketing the practice from a seasoned practitioner. It's great for the seasoned practitioner, too, for so many reasons, that having the energy of a new grad in there, not to mention that the younger generation of docs have absolutely no fear of technology or social media. They know how to go in there and help that. And I'm going to say that most senior docs, that might not be their forte. So coming together and strength in numbers, the associate-driven practice, I believe, is the very best thing for both existing seasoned practitioners and for new grads coming out. I think it's a wonderful, wonderful way to learn your practice and then to transition into the next phase of your practice. So let's hit it. How do you know if you're ready for an associate? Well, it's not just a numbers game. It's not simply how many patients do I see and then, okay, bing, now I'm ready. It's truly based upon capacity. So, for example, you can have a doc who sees 300 office visits a week with a single chiropractor and have no problem with capacity and are fine with that because of the technique that they use or the procedures that they deliver. And you can have, on the other hand, practices that use more time-dependent techniques, maybe some active release technique, maybe more hands-on, maybe a little more active care. They might reach 125 visits a week and feel like, man, I am bursting at the seams and I need some help here in practice. So here's some signs that you just might need an associate. If you're finding that it's hard to squeeze your patients in onto the schedule at the time that they'd like to be seen because your schedule is filled up, that's a sign that you might need an associate. If you start hearing some whining and griping about patients' wait time, having to sit there in the reception room to see the doctor during a regular visit, not so great. You know, in breakthrough coaching, we teach the 45-minute rule, and that means every minute longer than 45 minutes that a patient is in your practice for an office visit decreases the patient's compliance, decreases your PVA, your patient visit average. So wait time goes up, the practice will actually begin to contract. Same thing if your patients are used to the same day drop-in, we call them, or next day appointments, and you've got to book them out 3 to 4 days, that's definitely a sign that you probably need an associate. You know, if you feel like you're ball and chain, anchored to the chiropractic adjusting table, and gosh, you're on the treadmill of having to just care for patients and care for patients and care for patients. Stephen Covey calls it working in your business or working in your practice instead of having some time to work on your practice and taking some time to grow the practice and market the practice and lead and manage and groom and train your staff. If you're not able to do that, guess what? Might be time to step away from the table a little bit. You might have reached max volume, and it could be a great time to consider having an associate in there. I love the term chiropreneur. So that's a combination of chiropractor and entrepreneur. And if you find that you're wired a little bit more entrepreneurially and that you'd like to take a more entrepreneurial role in your practice, having an associate can actually buy you some more time to devote to working on your practice instead of just having to be in there delivering the care. It's a very unique business that we're in, chiropractic. You know, not only are you the product, your chiropractic adjustment product delivering great health care, but you are also the producer. You're the person who is the means of production of those adjustments as well. And so expanding the number of hands on deck, expanding the number of brains that can actually look at and analyze a case really allows the practitioner not only to have a greater clinical depth and breadth, but also being able to take care of the tons of opportunities out there, whether it's getting out into the local employers or networking with medical doctors or simply getting out there and doing some lunch and learns. It's tough to do that if your only break during the day is your lunch break, right? So having a team who can help you with that, having somebody else help share the load of patient care, allows you to really be more entrepreneurial, but it gives you the opportunity to have better work-life balance. You know, in the end, building and growing a successful practice is not it's not the end mission of your life. The end mission or the highest aim of your life really is how you're giving back to others, the relationships that you've built through a lifetime, your relationship with your family, your kids, being able to be there for the soccer game, being able to be there for graduation, being able to be there for vacation, family vacation together, with the peace of mind that that chiropractic practice isn't going to explode or fall apart if you're not there every minute of the time, is one of the greatest benefits from having an associate there in that practice. It allows you to really sustain a beautiful family life, community life, work life, spiritual life over the long term of a chiropractic career without burning out. Listen, I know docs and have been guilty of it myself, working 60 hours a week without having any time to devote to my family life. My golf game went to pieces, and just plain being a part of my community. It's a recipe for disaster, and it really is not the purpose of why we do what we do. Chiropractic care is physical work. I tend to let my friends know who are not chiropractors. They say, "Oh, you're a doctor." Well, man, it's very physical work. When they see you give an adjustment, it's a physical event. They see you give 50, 70 adjustments in a day. That definitely takes some stamina. So if you're coming home at the end of the day with some sore arms and you're dragging your butt, your energy is low, you may be at your max personal physical capacity. And that's an important thing to listen to. So many docs work past their personal physical capacity, and I can name chiropractor after chiropractor who have back problems and neck problems and shoulder problems and wrist problems themselves because they didn't listen to their body and they thought they could push through it and work through it. And what that ends up doing is making the end years of your career not so fun, really painful. And so planning for that, planning to have a beautiful work-life balance, but also planning to have a good, healthy body and being able to stand straight and tall without your body hurting all the time is something that you got to plan for. And an associate can certainly help you do that. If you've been a solo practitioner, one-man show, for 30 or more years, and you felt like you really never read an associate, bringing in an associate can be a really important first step toward exiting your practice. As most chiropractors, I'm going to say, I'm not going to just paint chiropractors with it, so I'm going to say most business people, you're so busy in the early days of your career of building your business, building your practice, you're not thinking about exiting that practice or who's going to be able to buy this thing when I'm done or what's my exit strategy. And in the middle of your career, when you got it figured out and things are moving, sometimes you're just so into the groove that you really don't want to mix it up and you don't want to change things. But at the end of your career, gosh, when you've got a successful practice, right, and if you're down to, and I get the calls from docs, and, rather than having a 5-year plan, which is the minimum of what you want to have in place, a 5-year plan of what I'm going to do when I step out of the practice, or I'll talk about this a little bit later, which I think is the very, very best strategy, is retiring within your practice. In other words, you transition that practice to a new owner. You don't have to own it, but you sure and heck can still work there. And you might not work at the level of production before you've retired, but being able to go in there for a couple of mornings a week if you're a morning person, or a couple of evenings a week, and be with your patients and still have the great feedback and positive reinforcement that you get from giving chiropractic care, the joys of seeing chiropractic care change a life, is a wonderful way to stay young yourself and retire yourself. Those of you who know me well, you know I talk about my dad all the time. My dad is a chiropractor, and growing up as a chiropractic kid, it really gave me the advantage of having the perspective of seeing the full arc of a chiropractic career. So the things that I'm teaching to you are not just something that I've observed, but they're actually parts of my life that I actually went through, of bringing in the associates and transitioning out of that practice, and then having Dad be able to retire and actually still work, and he loves to do nutrition and still do his nutritional consultations, and he did all the orthotic, that would be his thing, doing the orthotics in the practice, and doing a few wellness adjustments to his good longtime patients. So thinking about the end game in the beginning is super, super important. I encourage you very much to sit down with some quiet meditation time and ask yourself, where do I want to be in 5 years? If you're a little younger, where would I like to be in 10 years? Having that plan in place, it acts as a roadmap. It helps guide you. It helps direct you. And it also helps you put in place some of the strategies that we're going to talk about in our presentation today. So that associate in your practice could be your exit strategy, could be the person who's going to end up buying that practice. So there's a lot of upside to that, a lot of benefit to selling to an associate versus to somebody who is a stranger who's purchasing that practice from the outside. Number one, you've got a relationship together. You've worked with each other. You know the person's work ethic. You know the type of individual that you're dealing with. And that makes the transaction so much easier when you can trust the person that you're with. Your patients know the associate. The staff knows the associates, and there are good parts and bad parts that we all have. Listen, if you're going to have to hold a note, in other words, if you're going to have to be partial financier or partial providing the financing for that sale, you don't want to be in a position of doing this transaction with somebody who you really don't know what kind of work ethic they have, what kind of work habits they have. You want to be pretty clear on who you're dealing with. Listen, a very successful chiropractic practice might sell for somewhere between $500, $750, even $1 million. And who can afford to buy that practice? Well, I'm going to teach you a strategy that will help you do that. But understand, this is a significant asset, and you need somebody who's got the wherewithal, the brains, the smarts to make sure that your investment is protected. So you're going to have an associate. Number one, you got to find one, right? So let's talk about where to find a great associate once you've decided that this should be part of my strategy. Well, guess what? Number one, start in your own backyard. In many, many communities across the country, there are many doctors who are excellent chiropractors. What I mean by that is they have a great pair of hands. They can give a great adjustment. They can make a beautiful diagnosis, but they're just not business people. They're not the best entrepreneurs. Not everyone's wired that way. Guess what? Well, they can be great with their hands. If they're not great with their finances as well, they can be struggling. And there are docs out there in your own community who would probably fit that description. In other words, you'd probably love to have them be a part of the practice in terms of giving great high-quality care, but they're not necessarily the most prosperous doc, and they could use some help that way. Well, we recommend the strategy of a practice merger. So what's that mean? It means that you have the existing practice, the existing physical plant. Somebody else in the community might be leasing space, might be renting space, might have one of those smaller practices, and you can merge that practice in to your existing chiropractic practice. That merger is a technique that I used many times in my own career, and it can be a real win-win scenario for both parties. So the entrepreneurial doc, that's the guy who's maintaining or gal is maintaining the practice, they've got more time to devote to business. That means the administration, leadership, growth, HR, hiring, firing, expanding, marketing, all the components of running a healthy business. And that doc who's coming in as the associate can more focus on patient care. That practice merger is a wonderful, wonderful tool. In Breakthrough Coaching, we have some great strategies that can help you merge a practice into your own practice with very little risk based upon how you pay for that practice and pay out the practice. Chiropractic colleges, of course, have always been one of the main ways of finding associates. You can, if you're lucky enough, have a chiropractic college that's close to your practice and make some time to actually visit the campus, get to know the staff. I know now that there are many of the chiropractic practices that do have staff on, do have members of the staff who actually help with placement, departments that actually help their students find places across the country to practice in. Get time to know those faculty members. Get time to know, who's running the clinic, who are the clinic directors. Ask who's the star player. Who have you got who you think can be a great associate? Guess what? They'll tell you. They know who the winners are, and those are the connections that can help make sure that you're getting a great associate coming in. A lot of colleges, I think they all do, quite frankly, have career fairs where you can actually set up a table and market the position, right? Tell them what's great about your practice, what's different about your practice, what's different about your town. Why is that an attractive place for somebody to come and live and work and raise a family? So be in touch with the chiropractic colleges. Everybody's got a website, easy for you to find them. Relocation, docs who are moving into the area, certainly docs who would like to move into the area, and externships. So even if you don't have a local campus, I'll tell you, a lot of students are open to relocating if they have the right opportunity. In fact, some states actually provide an opportunity for students to perform an externship before they graduate, and you can actually host the externs in your practice. And many of the practices that I know have 2-3 externs at any one particular time. And again, you're looking for the cream to rise to the top, the associate who is, in fact, the going to be the great match for your practice. So see who rises to the top, and that's the person who's given the opportunity to transition from extern to associate. So here's some other great places to find an associate. You can put notices up in the student listing boards of the chiropractic college that surround your practice. Absolutely. Take note of colleges that are north, south, east, west. Take the broad approach and then move out across the country without a doubt. Keep an eye on your pipeline. I say always be advertising, and certainly if you're putting together your 5-year plan, don't wait until it's time, the exact time. Get out there in front of it. Most colleges allow you to put a job listing up on their website for free. Some there's a nominal fee. They want to have their grads have a pipeline of places to go and associate, just as you want a pipeline of associates. Check the websites on a regular basis. If you're actively looking for associate or not, always be looking, and it's going to give you a handle on what type of pipeline is going to be available to you when you're ready to pull the trigger. Social media is really big, in particular LinkedIn and Facebook. LinkedIn especially is a great source for potential associates. You should have a practice fan page. You should have a LinkedIn account. Super, super important. There are thousands of chiropractors out there on LinkedIn. It's something that you should be tapped in for your practice in your community. You find a lot of businesses who are interested in having a chiropractor also on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn's a little more business and Facebook a little more personal. So make sure you take a look. Those associates looking for a position, they've got a listing out there on all the major platforms, I can tell you. So let your contacts know. You know, that's the great thing about social media. It's connected to connected to connected. If you put a posting out there, it can get forwarded by somebody who you may not know and reach the right person that way. Most state associations and boards have a website that allow you to put a job listing up there as well. A lot of them have printed journals that invite listings by members for a discounted fee or, again, a lot of times for free. And also, this is a kind of a black belt tool. Most state boards make the list of recently licensed chiropractors available to you if you practice in that community. So that's a great tip to do. And don't neglect your patients. Your current patients can also be a source for potential associate referrals. You know, it might not be themselves, but they probably have friends or relatives that they know who've got a connection, who are looking with a student, a connection to a student who's looking for a job when they graduate. And so make your network of patients work for you by asking them to help you spread the word, not just for associates, but for staff members as well. That's a great, one of the best ways to find new staff members. So I want to give you a little heads up about the associate paradox, whether you're the associate or whether you're the owner doc with an associate coming in, some things you want to be aware of. First of all, I put associates into pretty much two different categories. They're based upon the personality types of associates. Call them the technician and the entrepreneur. Now, the technician is great at following the owner doctor's direction. They're very, very good at maintaining your current level of patient volume. Not really big on growing the practice. And I have to say, most associates fit into this category. New associates, they're really good at keeping the level of patients happy, keeping the pipeline full, not really great about expanding and growing the practice, right? That's the job of the owner. I absolutely, totally recommend personality profiling. And, you know, the entrepreneurial type of a chiropractor has that ability to get out there and market, generate the practice, lead your practice team, manage the business. So personality profiling, the number one that I recommend is called DC Hiring Pro. Phone number's up on the screen there, 919-847-1950. It's Jeff Henderson. Give Jeff a call. It is a super profile, 18 questions. You can't fake it out. And Jeff actually sits with you and goes through how this potential, I use this for key employees, office manager, et cetera. Also, I absolutely use this for my associates as well, and that lets me know not only what I need to be aware of the person's strengths and weaknesses, but also how that person will perform under stress so that I know better how to engage them and lead them forward, right? Super key thing. So DC Hiring Pro, the potential for employment longevity, sticking with your practice, is a little bit greater for the technician than for the entrepreneur. You know, the entrepreneur is wired more likely to see your practice as a stepping stone to owning their own future practice. That's how they're wired. So you want to be aware of that. So I recommend you really have a very open conversation about where your you see your practice in 1 year, 3 years, and 5 years, and also where the associate sees themselves in 1 year, 3 years, and 5 years. Have that conversation up front and make sure they sync, make sure they match up together. Associate risk versus reward. Well, technicians, if it's going to be you, you're going to really have a role of focusing on patient care and documentation, and you're going to adjust patients. So you're going to become an excellent chiropractor, and if that's your goal, that's going to be one of the great things about that. As an entrepreneur, you're going to have maybe a greater role in running the practice as a business. Doc may include you in on some of the finances so that you can see the profit and loss, the P&L statement, and see what it actually takes. What kind of profitability does the practice actually generate? What's it cost to generate that type of a profit? It could actually involve managing some of the staff meetings and other bits of team leadership that are going to help you be more prepared to run that practice that you may purchase, or in fact your own practice if you don't stick with that practice in the future. So there's risk and reward on both sides. Let's take a little bit. So we've talked about the types of associates that are out there. Robert Frost, the great American poet, said, good fences make good neighbors. Good fences make good neighbors, and good associate agreements make good associate relationships. So let's talk a little bit about the associate agreements that are out there. There's a couple of compensation models that you should be familiar with. First is straight salary. The second, more common, is salary plus a bonus commission. Either way, it starts with finding out exactly, and when I say exactly, I mean exactly, where the potential associate is financially. I want to know what their needs are. What is their monthly nut? What do they need in order to live the lifestyle that they currently have? And you've got to be able to meet those financial needs in order for the opportunity to be viable. If not, that doc's going to have to look for a second job. They're going to be out working nights. They're going to be doing all sorts of other things other than focusing on your practice, and we don't want that. So I'm going to give you a formula for it. Think of it as more of a formula rather than a fixed number. And I'm often asked this about what do I pay an associate, right? The base salary for an associate really can vary very widely depending upon the state's level of reimbursement, cost of living for sure, and the income that your practice currently generates without that associate being in there, okay? So your ideas and the associates must match up. If they don't, might be any sense in moving forward with that particular associate. So here are the tough questions that you need to find out, right? Number one, I'm asking the potential associate, what do you really need to live on, and do you have a personal monthly budget? What kind of student loans have you out there? Listen, I've seen associates who have student loans of $2,500 a month. It's more than half of their monthly living expense is student loans. Rent, mortgage, food and clothing, any auto loans. Listen, alimony, any consumer debt. If that associate has a poor credit rating, remember their likelihood is of being able to purchase that and turn that credit rating into a positive one is going to take some time, and that poses some additional risk to the owner. And make sure you include taxes in that number. So I need the number of what does it take for that associate to live. On top of that, what are the additional expenses that my practice is going to incur by having that doc associate on board? FICA, Social Security matching, state licensure fees, continuing ed fees, professional coaching and seminars, got to pay for breakthrough coaching, health insurance, malpractice insurance, if you've got a 401k or matching retirement account, increased overhead for staff, equipment, and supplies. Don't short on this. So that has to go into the base pay before we talk about any type of a bonus structure. Okay, I've got to be able to meet the practice has to be able to meet the associate's living expenses, and then in addition, I've got to be able to make sure that the increased overhead of having that doc there is also met. All of those expenses have to be considered when determining a bonus commission structure. So, to be able to participate in a bonus, the associate has to generate income at least equal to the base salary over and above what the practice was generating without an associate. Otherwise, what do you need that person there for, right? So I've got to be able to at least have my baseline, current baseline, reached. So let's go through some bonus structures that are out there. First one, percentage of collections. And that's a bonus that's based on a tiered, T-I-E-R, tiered scale based upon the volume of collections. In other words, as the volume of collections increases, the percentage of the bonus increases, and here's the underline, up to a cap. So in other words, my first example, once we've met our base, over and above beyond everything that we collect from $5,000 up to $501 up to $10,000, 10% of monthly collections, and that can increase a point, point and a half, a couple of points, point and a half, as each milestone is reached, and that caps out, so that we're not just working for the associate. Second one, percentage of collections. This one, we're selling the first one, gives the associate a greater opportunity to control his or her income by focusing on patient retention, delivering ancillary services, active care, product sales, maintaining PVA, keeping missed appointments down. This structure also gets a more mature associate in tune with case management, limiting missed appointments, getting patients in when they're not scheduled. So the second one, first one's percentage of collections. Second one is number of office visits. So this one's based upon the total number of office visits seen by the practice. And it's typically used when starting a recently graduated associate who's simply not experienced in generating income. They're not focused on collections, more on production. It's an easy number for a new grad to grasp, and it alleviates the owner from having to share or open up your books to a junior staff member. Here's an example. Each patient between 0 and 175 seen per week shall be at $1 per patient bonus. That increases up to 175 to 250, goes to $2. For each patient over 250, should be $3 per patient. Again, you can cap that as well. Let's talk about training an associate. Okay? First of all, you want an associate that matches up with your current adjusting technique, your philosophy toward case management and treatment plan recommendations. In other words, if you're used to seeing a patient for 24, 28, 30 visits and then discharging them to wellness care, and that associate has a mindset of 1 to 2 visits out of pain and you're done, that's going to absolutely drop the bottom out of your practice. You also want a patient and associate who has a similar table-side manner to yours, right? So that they're going to match up with the expectations of the patient. Be sure to have that potential associate adjust you, give you that chiropractic adjustment as part of the interview process. Maybe adjust some of your other staff members. You want to see what kind of hands they have. What are their ability to deliver a chiropractic adjustment? Listen, the ideal situation is the team approach. And that's where patients are comfortable being seen by either the owner or the associate for their chiropractic adjustment. Either one of you can walk in the room and deliver the adjustment. The patient's going to be thrilled. This removes stress from the patients, removes stress from your practice team members. It's the goal. I recommend a process called shadowing. Right? You, as the associate, you become my shadow for anywhere from 30 to 90 days. What does that mean? It means the associate follows the owner right into the treatment room and observes the process of delivering a chiropractic adjustment. We introduce the patient, this is new associate Bob. He's coming on, Dr. Bob, and he is going to be become an integral part of our practice, and I want him to see exactly how I adjust you so that when it comes time for him to give you an adjustment, he knows exactly what to do. These procedures should include not only the adjustment, but also new patient exams, consultations, clinical and underlying and financial report of findings. That associate needs to know how to deliver a financial report of findings just as well as any other members of the team who do that. Have the associate help out with ancillary services and active care to increase patient interaction and familiarity. In other words, get them involved with care. Have them shadow up the front desk, in the billing department, and other administrative positions. This way, the associate gets an overall view of the function of the practice and the value of each team member in the practice. So, priming the pump for new patients. And this is an important thing. This is how we launch the associate's career in our practice. Number one, get involved. If the purpose for bringing an associate is for growth and expansion of the practice, then that associate is going to, at some level, be expected to participate in new patient acquisition. Right? Great attitude to have is if you want your community to support your practice, you've got to support the community first. So that's getting involved with the Chamber of Commerce, local charities, local organizations, volunteering for sports team care, getting involved. I say, listen, you want to become the mayor of that community. Where you go, people get to know you, get to see you. They get to say, that's Doc. Hey, or you're Dr. Sanna. I've heard about you, right? That's not going to happen if you're just stuck in the office all the time. You've got to get out, both physically and on social media as well. That associate ought to be manning those social media accounts at some degree so that we're getting the word out there. So I call it prime the pump. Here's how we start the practice. If a patient doesn't request to see a specific doctor, in other words, they want to come and see Dr. Sanna, great, they would come to me directly. Or if their referral source isn't from a specific referral source to me, the owner doctor, then we have what's called a new patient rotation. So, for example, it might go this way, and this can change depending upon how much of the practice you want to continue to maintain. With every 3 new patients that comes in, the 4th and 5th are assigned to the new associate. It's a great way for that associate's practice to begin to grow. I love the model of the tandem practice. Tandem practice, that's a rotation of roles between the owner and the associate doctor. Here's what it means. Each takes a turn in performing exams and reports of findings, maybe taking x-rays, while the other provider is the adjusting doc. This approach ensures that both the associate doc has the opportunity to learn patient management procedures, and also the owner doc gets to keep a finger on the control of the practice, not ceding complete control over to a less experienced clinician. So you got your hand in a little bit of everything. Some of the patient care, some of the exams, reports of findings, and eventually, as that doc becomes stronger in those procedures, you might give them more of those duties to perform in the practice as well. Well, it's always hard to say goodbye, right? But there can be a time to say goodbye to an associate. And, you know, as chiropractors, we have a tough time of doing this. I like to say chiropractors think they can fix everybody. And listen, sometimes it's just not the right fit for your practice. It's better to cut that relationship short fast. As I said, we don't like saying goodbye to anybody, even practice team members, and we think we can fix them all. So how do you know it's not a right fit? Well, it could be simply the numbers are not there, but could there be some leading indicator? In other words, an indicator, something that is a red flag that lets you know up front that, hey, man, this just isn't working out and we've got to maybe move on. Well, here are some indicators that it's just not the right fit. Procedural inefficiencies. In other words, what do I mean by that? I mean, we do a 5-minute office visit or a 10-minute, and I cannot get that associate into the amount of time that we normally. They are still in there for 15 minutes with a patient, and it messes up the whole schedule, right? Big deal. Lack of follow-through with documentation, coding, and compliance requirements. Hopefully you have a living compliance program. You're auditing your own charts on a quarterly basis. You're spot checking files for matching up documentation, coding, and compliance. An associate who has to be corrected more than a couple of times with their documentation, that's a big deal. That's something you need to pay attention to because you're placing your practice at risk. Lack of timeliness to the office. They're showing up late. They're not being there when they agree, not doing the outside duties that we have requested of them. Big red flag about work ethic there. Also hard one to correct, right? If you have to correct that again more than a couple of times, it's the wrong person. And there you go. Again, I mentioned this lack of timeliness with treating patients. If your patients are having to wait, if you're getting backed up, bogged down because that associate is running their mouth in there instead of running their hands with the patient, that's a big red flag. This one is an important one, and I call it the risk of fraternization. What does that mean? Well, there's a tendency for associates to perceive themselves as a peer with the non-licensed practice team members, front desk, back office. They get chummy with them. They allow that staff permission to use their first name and instead of being referred to as doctor, right? That's really hard to walk back once that's gone out the gate, okay? It results in a sense of familiarity that makes it really challenging for that associate to move into a leadership position. You can really set your associate up for success by having a preemptive conversation together about being cautious about being perceived as a member of the practice team leadership and not simply a member of the practice team. Big one, important. Practice a good attitude. Listen, saying goodbye to an associate who wasn't the right fit for your practice opens up the door for that associate to achieve success in another practice in the future. You holding them in that position a day longer than they should have been let go, you're doing them a disservice. It also makes room in your practice to find the associate who is the perfect match for you and your patients. Don't be afraid to move on. So I recommend that each one of you applies for a complimentary practice associate analysis. And I'm going to put a phone number up there for you. It's 800-723-8423 or 1-800-7 and the word advice, ADVICE, or you can simply email Debbie, and she's at btcdeb@gmail.com. And what she'll do is she'll introduce you and me, and we'll synchronize our schedules together, and we'll be able to set up a time with you for me to actually look at your specific needs and your specific practice. So before I open up to questions, I want to go through a couple of real-life scenarios here that I think are really important to know. I mentioned a little bit earlier what I feel is the very, very best way for an associate and the owner to enter into a relationship that allows the owner to have the great peace of mind of knowing that the associate has skin in the game and allows that associate the opportunity to build equity in that practice and build a financial nest egg as they're working as an associate in that practice for the long term. And here it is. It's called the Sweat Equity Buyout. SEBO, S-E-B-O, the Sweat Equity Buyout. I did a great article on this in Chiropractic Economics magazine. You could Google Chiropractic Economics, Mark Sanna, Sweat Equity Buyout, and this article will come up, and I recommend reading it. But let me introduce you to the principle. This is setting up, just as we said before, a base pay, and that base pay for an associate, for them to live on, is going to be somewhere between $4,000, might even be $5,000. That's the base, and then your increased expense could be another $4,000, so that the base is somewhere usually between $8,000 and $12,000 before a bonus structure gets put in place. And that's pretty typical for all associate agreements. However, in the Sweat Equity Buyout, the bonus structure is structured differently. And what we put in place is an escrow account. So rather than the associate simply taking the bonus monies and putting them in their pocket and maybe increasing their lifestyle or buying a nicer car or taking a nicer vacation, those bonus monies go into an escrow account. Now, that escrow account is actually held in anticipation of that associate purchasing the practice. So every month that bonus grows. That month that bonus grows, and it grows and it grows. And I know some practices that actually do matching. In other words, everything that you put in, I'll match it up to a certain amount. And the reason is you're actually paying it forward. That nest egg is going to be used for that associate to purchase your practice. I mentioned a little earlier, a very successful chiropractic practice could be worth $300,000 to $500,000 up to $1 million. And quite frankly, an associate does not have the access to capital. Most individuals might not have the access to capital to purchase a very successful chiropractic practice. So this nest egg, this escrow account that has been growing over a 5-year period of time, and it can be done in 3 years, but it's typically a 5-year plan, grows until it can reach up to $150,000, $250,000. Now, a few things happen here. That now we're 5 years into the relationship, that, let's say that practice is worth $750,000. Okay, very successful chiropractic practice. Now that associate has the $250,000 there perfectly. They can then go to the bank and very easily, especially from a community bank, obtain a business loan for purchasing that practice. So a few things that this sweat equity buyout program allows. Number one is there's a track record established for that associate who has worked in the practice that they're purchasing over 5 years. We know what that practice can generate. We know the value of the practice. It's kind of like buying your own practice, quite frankly, as the associate. And so that associate can easily go out there and get another chunk of capital to purchase that practice. So if you do, as the owner, have to hold a note for some of the equity, you know you've already got at least 3/4 of that practice paid for when that associate steps in place. Second thing that happens here, so that's why it's great for the associate. The associate is earning equity to purchase a practice that they might not ever have been able to purchase without this sweat equity buyout program. The second thing, as the owner doctor, is you now have protection of somebody walking away after 5 years and leaving you in a position where now you're 5 years older and you're having to get back into the saddle and start seeing 50, 60 patients a day in order to maintain the practice and the overhead in place because that doc walked away. Well, how we prohibit that from happening or keep that from happening is that the escrow account is forfeited by the associate should they break the contract, leave the practice before their 5-year program, where we've had the opportunity to build that equity. So you quit after the first 2 years, guess what? I get to keep whatever's in that escrow account. So it provides you with a security, the peace of mind knowing that this associate agreement is not going to fall apart in 3 years, and then I'm starting all over again from ground zero, from scratch. That's the last thing that we want to do as a practice owner. We want to make sure that we've got some security in place. So my recommendation really is put in place that escrow account. You can also see, by the way, after a year, after 2 years, if you go that far, if that associate is not producing at a level that's going to put them in a position to have that escrow account be sufficient enough to purchase that practice, well, then we may have the wrong associate there, right? We might have the wrong person in place. So my thoughts is find the greatest associate that you can that can match up with your practice. Please personality profile them, screen them in place so we know what type of a personality we're dealing with. Give them a great incentivized structure with the escrow account, giving you some security there. And then finally, don't be afraid to cut bait, and cut bait quickly if this is not the right person. I want the owner to have a great experience with this, and I'd like the associate doc to also have a great experience with this. And by setting this up and setting the relationship up and setting the agreement, the contract up between both parties properly up front, can absolutely see that you are in a great position. So I see we've got some questions here, Christy, so I'm going to put on my eyeglasses here, and I'm going to read this question. It says, if the owner is slowed down with his age and the practice has slowed down, it's no longer high production with optimum income, how would the selling price be presented in the most positive way? Also being able to pay the associate a reasonable salary. So there's a lot of docs that are in this position. They've gone a little long. They maybe should have had an exit strategy in place, and the practice is beginning to contract. Well, of course, that is going to impact the value of that practice. There's lots of ways to value a practice. My rule of thumb is about 10 times the average monthly collections. So the average collections in the practice times 10, and that's going to give me the ballpark value of that practice. A practice that's collecting $30,000 a month is about a $300,000 practice. I want to see that the difference in the balance of insurance versus cash, higher level of cash collections increases the value of the practice as well. Also with this doc who's actually been in a community, has longevity, socially known, probably not social media, socially known in that practice, being able to make those connections, make those introductions in the community also helps with that practice. again, if you're interested, that doc could actually continue to retire within that practice and really serve a great role for the new doc who's coming in, who might not have the experience and the knowledge that the doc who's starting to slow down a little bit may have. So, Christy, I think we're at about the top of the hour, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be with everyone here, and I encourage you to give us a call, and I'd love to spend some time with your actual specific interests for your own practice. So thanks a lot, Christy.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sanna, and thank you to all of you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here today. If any of you are going to be at the FCA National in Orlando, Florida this weekend, which is our largest chiropractic convention in the country, you can see Dr. Mark Sanna live on Friday from 3:20 to 5 p.m. He is part of the Success Track at FCA, so be sure to check it out if you are going to be there. And again, that's Friday at 3:20 p.m. Dr. Mark Sanna will be speaking live and in person. So, Dr. Sanna, thank you so much. And just as a reminder, because of the big convention this weekend, there will be no webinar next week, but we will pick up with Dr. Tom Nasila on August the 28th at 2:15 p.m. Eastern Time. The following week, we're going to have social media guru Dr. Matthew Loop. Incredible man. He's been doing social media for all kinds of famous people. But he's also a doctor of chiropractic, and he knows about marketing and utilizing social media in a small practice and a local practice. And so he will be our first webinar of September on September the 11th. So register early. Thank you so much. I hope you all have an amazing rest of your day and a fabulous week. And if you're at FCA this weekend, we look forward to seeing you there. Bye, everyone. Dr. Sanna?